Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and I get to travel to the most interesting parts of the footprint of Better Life TV. We're going new places today, and I want you to meet our guest because he's traveled to all of them and some others too. This is Bob Heisler, right?
That's right.
Bob, you were a little boy where?
Oh my. First 9 years were spent in Salem, Oregon. And then the war came along, and my mother took a teaching position over at Newport, church school. At Newport, my father was working in the shipyard, the Kaiser shipyard up in Vancouver during the war. So that was during the war. Yeah. And then from there we moved down to Yachats, and from there down to Florence. And it was there that I went away to school.
And that's where I got to meet you,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Now, were you there when Vanport happened, when that town was built up for the war effort? Those crackerbox houses?
Yes. I think I remember that. If I remember right, was that on the Oregon side? Or
it was on the Oregon side.
Okay, and they had a big flood there at one time, didn't they?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of our guests was part of that flood, and
oh my.
They got the feeling that they should move. The car came, and they jumped in, leaving everything behind.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And they just got out of there in time, I'll bet.
Yeah, having no idea that others weren't notified. But I went there as a kid and saw the damage. Now, when you kept moving south, I mean, the weather didn't get better, but wow, you had the ocean to play in.
Oh yeah, that was great. And we lived right on the bluff overlooking the ocean in Yachats. Actually, it was 8 miles south of Yachats. Just about as far away from civilization as you could get. But you know, it's gone even further back. We had neighbors that no longer exist. Their houses no longer exist in that area. That area is more primitive now than it was 50 years ago.
Oh, I've heard of Yachats a bunch.
Oh, I'll bet you have.
I mean, that is the Oregon coast at its best. I mean,
it is.
So what all did you get to do there?
Well, let's see. We moved there right after the war. Dad came home from the shipyard, and Mom had allergies, and she thought if she could live on the coast, it would help her allergies. And so they bought a house 8 miles south of Newport. And I might say that during that year, it was an interesting year. We lived in 3 houses in Newport during the year. And one of them was very close to the Yaquina Head lighthouse. Just south of the lighthouse. We could see it from the windows of our house. Yeah, going around and around. And of course, back in those days during the war, you couldn't go out there unless you were authorized. Civilians couldn't go out there unless they had a pass or something. So that was kind of, sacred ground, you might say. And as a little boy, I remember seeing that light. Agate Beach is where we lived, the 3rd house we lived in there.
Ooh, and so did you collect agates?
Oh yes, and there were lots of them.
And I'll just bet that in all the moves you've made since then, they got lost someplace. And
yes, those have been lost, I'm sure, but I found some others. And actually, when we were in Brazil, we lived in the state of Minas Gerais. Now, in Portuguese, that means general mines. And they have all kinds of semi-precious stones in that area. And so I was able to get these tumbled stones there, and I still have a collection of them.
Oh, wow. Well, next time you come to Better Life TV, bring a collection of stones.
All right.
But you jumped way ahead.
Yeah,
Let's get to the Brazil part, but South America. But where did you move after your mom was teaching school?
Okay, that was down to Yachats, 8 miles south of Yachats. And I was about 10 or 11 years old at that time. And my parents, when Dad came home from the shipyard, jobs were real scarce because, you know, the servicemen were coming home and the factory workers, you know, the government war effort jobs.
No more shipbuilding.
No more shipbuilding, yeah. The shipyard was closed, though I think they did convert it to make Kaisers or Frasers or something, cars that didn't last too long. But anyway, we were down there, and what to do? There were no jobs. So the folks discovered that we could go pick fern. Now the fern is something like this, a little bigger than the ones that you're handling, more like the ones in front of the table there are the ferns that we pick.
Who'd pay you to pick fern?
Well, the florists.
Of course.
And there was a wholesaler in Florence who would buy the fern from you. And the fern, there are 52 fronds in a bunch. And you have a little ring with a little cutting semicircle on it. And you reach around and you hook that on the fern, and it just snaps it right off. And then in this hand, you would lay the ferns down and you would count them as you pick them until you had 52. And then on your belt, you would carry a bunch of strings that were pre-cut to the right length. And you would grab it by the end and wrap that string around it and then pull it through. And it made a pretty tight, not a knot, but a way of keeping the ferns from getting loose and getting disorganized.
Now this guy obviously knows what he's talking about. Did you see the eyes sparkle? I was out picking fern and I found out they dry up awful quick.
They do,
How
don't
did
they?
you keep them from not doing this?
Well, the sword fern, the kind that we picked, they keep pretty well as long as you keep them in a cool place. And of course, there on the coast, it was pretty cool. And so we'd stack them in the shed. And when we got a truckload, we'd take them down to Florence and sell them.
What's this truckload business?
Yeah, imagine, you can't imagine. When we first started out, actually, we would take them in the trunk of our car down to Florence. And they would give us 10 cents a bunch for them.
52 fern tied up.
For
and
10
you
cents.
Got
10 cents. Yeah, 10
I mean,
cents.
it's a cash crop, but doesn't it cost you that much to drive there?
Well, you got to remember that this was, 60 years ago? Maybe 70 years ago? Not quite 70, 65 years ago.
We're old, Bob, but not that old.
Yeah, 65 years ago. And 10 cents a bunch. 100 bunches was about max for what you could pick in a day. If you had really good pickings, you could get 100 bunches in a day, and that was $10.
And now who was picking?
Well, my father and my mother and my older brother and myself. So that's 4 of us.
And your older brother's name?
Bill.
Bill. And Mom and Dad are... Your dad's name is?
Leonard and Ellen Jean.
Okay. Now, we don't hear a whole lot until I get acquainted with you, but that's a little bit later.
Yeah.
I understand you used to go to junior camp at Lake of the Woods Boy Scout Camp. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. But before we talk about that, I want to say a little more about the fern. I remember the first check my father got from the fern that we delivered there to Callison's. That's the name of the company that bought fern, and then they sold it to the florists. And the first check that they got was for $5.50. And we thought we were rich. We thought that...
That's for 4 people working.
4 people working for probably 2 days. Of course, we were just learning. And you know, it takes longer when you're learning.
Oh, yeah.
But we got up to where, and then the price went up. I think we were getting 14 or 15 cents a bunch 5 years later.
Well, every funeral piece used to have these great big fern, and then so would the standing pieces. They were a very big part of
And
floral.
we also picked huckleberry brush.
Why?
The florists used that too. And moss. We would find moss on trees and take it off the trees and put it in gunny sacks and sell it to the florists as well.
For how much would you get that?
I don't remember how much we got
sack.
for the moss, but it wasn't a whole lot. But you know, things were more simple back in those days. And so we started out with a car, 1936 Ford. And then we would take our fern down to Callison's, and it wasn't long until the folks figured out, you know, we could get more for our fern if we would sell it direct to the florists instead of selling it to the wholesalers. So my mother went over to Salem, because that's where we lived for quite a few years, and she visited all the florists in town and said, we'd like to supply your fern direct. And we will bring it in once a week. And they found one florist who had a large cooler, and they were sort of the distribution point for all the others. The other florists could come and get their fern from them, and so it kept it cool. And it was either once a week or once every other week we would go over there. Well, that went on until we had to get a trailer behind the car, and then as the business grew, we needed more than the car and trailer. So Mother started looking for something a little larger. And it was right after the war, probably 1947 by this time, or 48, and she found an old Dodge Army ambulance. And she came home with that one day, because she's the one that delivered the fern over there while we were out working. Oh, and we also bought a donkey.
A real donkey?
A real donkey. His name was Duffy. And the idea was that he was going to pack the fern and huckleberry brush for us, but he was kind of lazy and he didn't like to step over things. And he would sometimes even sit down on his haunches and hee-haw at us. So he wasn't all that productive, but he was fun to ride. And I was a little kid, and so that was my introduction to a horse. And I remember one time I rode down to 10 Mile Creek. I should say up to 10 Mile Creek. It's about, a mile and a half north of where we lived. And there was an old covered bridge there. And so I rode him across this covered bridge, but at the end he had to step down, maybe a foot and a half, something like that, which he didn't mind doing. But when I came back, there was no way he was going to step up onto that bridge. Absolutely not. So I thought, well, I'll just ride him over to the concrete bridge, and I can easily get him to go across that. You know, he would come up to that concrete, and the minute he touched that concrete, he would brace his front feet, and he would not go. I mean, he just would not move forward. And it was getting late in the afternoon, and I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to get home? And it was just starting to get dark, and you know, I'd circle him around, I'd gallop him, I'd whack him, and I'd do everything I could to try to make him go across that bridge. Nothing worked.
So what did you do?
Well, finally my dad came looking for me. And he had this Army truck, this old Dodge Army ambulance. And he got out of the truck and he was upset. Why aren't you home yet? The cows aren't in yet. You know, my job was to bring in the cows at night because they wandered around in the forest during the day, and the forest was just behind the pasture, and a lot of times it was very difficult to find them. So I said, Dad, I'd have been home a long time ago, but I can't get this stupid donkey to go across this bridge. And he sized the donkey up and says, I'll take care of that. You get in the truck. So he got a rope out, tied it on the truck, and tied the other end around the donkey's neck, got in the truck and took off. And that donkey skidded all the way across the bridge. Woo!
Wow.
And so we got home okay. And,
But with this big ambulance,
yeah.
that's your only vehicle, right?
At this time it was, yeah. By this time it was the only vehicle we had.
And it hauled all kind of things.
Oh,
Fern going and
It did. Dad had a school bus route in probably 49. Yeah, I think it was 1949.
And you used the ambulance for the.
Used the ambulance. You know, it had fold-down seats inside. I think it was also used as a troop carrier because it had seats on both sides.
And then that comes to Lake of the Woods.
Yes.
Why was it at Lake of the Woods?
Well, the first year that my brother and I went to junior camp, we didn't think we were going to get to go. No, that was the second year. The first year, we had one of the elders of the church had a Model A Ford, and he took us to junior camp. And I think there were 3 or 4 of us. And I remember on that trip, we traveled all night to get there. And about 2:30 in the morning, we stopped at Canyonville. And the building is still there. It's got kind of a dome-shaped roof on it. It's just very close to the turnoff to go up Days Creek, or up the Umpqua River, towards Day Creek and Milo. And we stopped there for something. I don't remember just what it was, but there were logging trucks like you wouldn't believe there at 2:30 in the morning. And that place was just as alive as New York City.
Oh.
And we had more fun on that trip. That old Model A, it only went about 25 miles an hour, 30 at the most. And we would sit in the back there, and I remember singing, "In my heart there rings a melody, rings a melody, rings a melody." And that poor old man that took us there, I'm sure we about drove him crazy.
Because you're about 10 years old, maybe?
Yeah, 10, 11 years old, something like that.
Well, the next year's what I heard about.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got to tell you about the second year. The third year was the Army ambulance. The second year, we wanted to go, but we didn't have a way to get there. And we knew that there was a school bus going up to Lake of the Woods from Ashland on Sunday morning. And but we didn't have any way to get out to Eugene to take a bus down to Ashland. But at church on Saturday morning, we found out that one of the members was going to drive to Eugene that afternoon. And yes, my brother and I could go with him, and he would drop us off at the bus depot. And the plan was to take the bus down to Ashland and then get the bus on up to the Lake of the Woods. Well, we took the old route. That was the only route back in those days.
Through Drain.
No, it was further north than that. It's the one that went up by Mapleton and Triangle Lake and Blatchley and across that way. It's before Route F and the tunnel. But anyway, we got out there, and it was 10 minutes to 1, and there was a bus leaving at 1 o'clock. And we had it planned so we would take the evening bus. So we would be on the bus all night, and we would get there in the morning just in time to catch the bus, or, with a little time to spare, to catch the school bus that went up to Ashland. So, up to Lake of the Woods. So 10 minutes to 1, 10 minutes to get the bus. And I said, "Bill, let's get on this bus. Let's go down to Ashland now." And he, no, we need to wait for the evening bus so we'll have a place to stay tonight on the bus. We can stay in the bus depot. Let's stay in the, come on, let's go now. And finally my brother caved in and said, "Okay, let's go now." So we got our tickets and got on that bus. And it got us down there about 8 o'clock that night. That was an 8-hour ride from Eugene to Ashland. Back in those days, or maybe 10 hours, something like that. It was a long, long bus ride.
But yeah,
it was before they had the freeway.
Because that's when you went into Drain and Yoncalla.
Yeah, all those little towns. So anyway, we got there, and we got our suitcases, and we curled up on a couple of chairs there in the bus depot, and we weren't sitting on those chairs more than about 5 minutes, and somebody came along and said, we're closing the depot in 10 minutes. You'll have to leave. Well, we didn't know where to go. We didn't have any place to go.
Probably very little money, too.
Oh, yeah, no, we just had a few cents. Didn't have any money for a hotel. So we said, okay, and we picked up our suitcases and walked out and started walking down the street. We came to a place called the Mark Hopkins Hotel. Is that right? Mark Anthony Hotel. The Mark Anthony Hotel. And my brother says, hey, they got a nice lobby here. Let's try it. So we walked in there and sat down on the Davenport there, and pretty soon the manager came over and said, what are you kids doing here? He said, well, our bus got here too early, and we're going to junior camp tomorrow, and we don't have any place to stay tonight. Oh. Well, I'm not supposed to let anybody stay in the lobby overnight. So you're going to have to go on, but I'll tell you what I'll do. You kids can sleep on the couches here tonight, but about 5 o'clock I'm going to come and wake you up. And I want you to wake up and I want you to sit up straight and pretend like you're waiting for someone. Okay, that's fine with us. And so that's what happened. And 5 o'clock, sure enough, he came, woke us up. We sat there, just like obedient children for about an hour, and until it got light. Well, no, it was light before that. It was getting light when he woke us up. And so then we walked down to the church because we didn't know where the bus left from. Can you imagine a 11 and 12-year-old out on their own?
No, I cannot.
We found the church, but there was nobody there. Well, what to do now? How are we going to find this bus? We know it leaves from Ashland, but where does it leave from? So we started down the street, just knocking on doors. Do you know any Seventh-day Adventists in this town? And about the third or fourth house, oh, yes, I know a lady. She lives over on the other side of town. Let me give her a call. And so she called up, came back and says, yes, this lady knows all about the bus to camp. You can walk over there. It's leaving at 10 o'clock, and it's now about 8 o'clock. You got plenty of time to get over there. And she'll give you some breakfast.
Oh, I wanted to. Do you have any idea her name?
I have no idea.
Oh,
I have no
if
idea
anybody knows this, dear lady, she, I bet you she's told that story about two little boys.
Yeah.
Hungry. You ate a hearty meal.
Oh, listen, let me tell you about the pre-breakfast we had. So we started walking across town, and it wasn't all that far, but it's pretty far for two little boys.
With suitcases.
With suitcases, right. And we came to this place in the middle of town where they had fountains.
Oh.
Now, they're still there, I think.
A triangle park.
The sulfur water.
Lithia water.
Yeah, and so we tried each one of them to see which one was the best. And they all tasted terrible. Anyway, we finally found them, and we got our breakfast, and then we got on the bus and went off to junior camp. So that was our adventure to junior camp. Now, the part you're wanting.
We've got 4 whole minutes, but I got to get this story.
Okay, let's get to the bus. That was the third year. We went in the Army truck that we used for picking ferns.
You must have been 13 by this time, or your brother was?
12 and 13, something like that. And my dad had just decided to give up drinking coffee. And he hadn't really kicked the habit yet, but he was trying. And so he had a big Folgers, tin can, and he emptied all of his coffee that had caffeine in it. And no. He emptied all the caffeine coffee out of this can, and then he poured it full of decaffeinated coffee.
Okay.
Now, I got that backwards. He put the caffeine coffee in the decaffeinated can.
Okay.
And took it with him to junior camp.
Now,
because he got terrible headaches if he didn't drink it.
Now, your dad put how many kids in the car?
Oh, there were at least 4 of us, I think.
Okay, and you go up that road, and as I remember, It was a washboard road
Yes,
that
it
go
was.
up, 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 up.
I remember it
Depending
more on the
on-
school bus than I do on our truck. But yeah, it was a gravel road back in
So
those
why
days.
do I want you to tell that story? Because you
Yeah.
and the ambulance became the envy of every boy
All the
at
kids
camp.
at camp. Yeah,
Can you imagine? He came in the Army ambulance.
yeah, yeah.
Now, when I mentioned that to my brother, he had that story because that was really,
Oh, yeah.
really a neat
Yeah.
thing.
Before we moved down here, every time I'd see Henry, he'd mention the Army ambulance.
At camp, we learned lots of things. It was a Boy Scout camp, and boys and girls went there in our church group.
Yeah.
And I was much younger. We've already discussed that because, see, this is the school annual.
Yeah.
When we were in school in Washington State, Vancouver, battleground, and there he is, Bob Heisler, one of the really, really important guys on campus.
No, I was the pastor by that time.
Yes, you were.
The,
Almost
senior class pastor.
And over here someplace is this freshman girl
Oh, yeah.
named Bernie. And he didn't remember me,
Yeah.
but I remembered him.
That's the way it is. You know, when I went off to college the next year, there were about 800 kids in the college, Pacific Union College, and I knew the names of everybody that was there. By the time I was a senior, I only knew my class.
Oh, our time's gone so
Yeah,
much.
I know.
I just love to tell more stories about that South America adventure, but next
Yeah.
time,
All right.
let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying thanks so much for tuning in. It's fascinating to learn the stories of when we were kids. If you have a story you'd like to share, get in touch with Better Life TV. Colin, bye from Better Life and Bernie Martin Beck. Thanks again, Bob.
Okay.